Hey, songwriters. In this video, we're talking to Chuck Thomas. He's a songwriter that just won the American Songwriter Magazine November-December lyric writing contest. He won first place, and we're going to talk to him about his journey through songwriting. He's an at-home songwriter, kind of like me and you. So let's find out more about Chuck. Let's go. Welcome back to At Home Songwriting. I'm Chad Shank, and today we have a special guest with us, Chuck Thomas, who's an at-home songwriter who just won a great contest with American Songwriter Magazine. He won the November-December lyric contest first place for a song that he wrote called Don't Waste the Rain. So we say welcome to Chuck. Hey, Chuck, how's it going?
Doing great. It's just wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining. And I mentioned that you won the November-December songwriting contest with American Songwriter. So I've seen that contest many years, subscribing to the magazine. What is that like to get that call?
Yeah, I didn't even take the call because I didn't recognize the number. So I let it go to voicemail. and I checked it a little bit later in the morning, and it was the associate publisher. And yeah, I mean, I really wasn't expecting that. It's the first time first song I've ever entered into any competition, and so the call was completely unexpected, but very exciting to get. And when I called him back and he verified, Doug verified that I was the winner, I was very honored. I mean, it's I see these people every 2 months, get their picture in a magazine and read their songs, read their lyrics, and you don't. It's kind of like Publishers Clearinghouse, right? They say people win, but you don't really know. Do they really win? Are these real people? So, and I said that to one of my songwriting groups the other night. I said, well, now people actually do win this. This is a real deal, and so it's been really exciting. It's been a lot of fun.
So obviously you and I have known each other for going on a year. We've been in some songwriting groups and things together. As you know, this channel is really about songwriting techniques and really talking about songwriters, sort of like you and I, that are just really into the craft of songwriting and want to learn and do the best that we can. So as you entered these contests, did you send in multiple songs, or was this the only one, or what was that process?
I wrote this song just a little over a year ago, and it's just been kind of sitting around. And I mean, I love the song, but I was reading it, and again, I was looking at the lyrics, and I come up with a melody for it and whatnot, and I just thought, you know what, I'd like to see, American Songwriter isn't necessarily about, the top hits on the radio. It's not really, it's accepting of lyrics that are maybe not mainstream. I consider this more of like an Americana-ish song. And I thought, what the heck, I'm a member of American Songwriter. I see these people who are sharing their songs, and they're every 2 months, and I thought, I think this might stack up against the others. But no, I haven't just flooded the entry box with a bunch of songs. No, this was on the heels of this. I do have a song in the next competition, so I don't know if this is like lottery fever, or now I'm going to start doing it every 2 months. But I'm sure the American Songwriter people would love me to do it every 2 months, but I do have a song in the next competition too.
Well, they do the competition every 2 months, so I'll put a link to the contest down in the description for people to click on so they can enter. But what I really wanted to talk to you about today is, obviously you're doing something right, that it caught attention. I wanted to talk about the process of that song, but then also, you're a relatively new songwriter. So how did you get into songwriting? Like what pulled you into the craft itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we all have to come into the songwriting from something, right? Something must interest us in the terms of writing and our skills with storytelling. And that's been me since I was young. I've always welcomed, storytelling and writing. I've been writing since high school, creative writing in college, and though it sounds a little bit cliche, I've done some poetry, and that's the way a lot of songwriters start. A lot of folk songwriters start as poets, uh, and I was that. I was a published poet in college. I dabbled with it throughout my adult life. Had always thought about, songwriting would be a fun thing to do, and a great way to express my creativity. And that's pretty much, where it started, until, maybe 2.5 years ago, I guess, is when I finally made a commitment to write my first song. And I wrote a song called Ivory Triggers, and nobody's ever seen those lyrics. Nobody probably ever will unless I rewrite it. It's a song about an experience I had with Jerry Lee Lewis when I was first out of college, and it has to do with sitting down with him and meeting him and talking with him, and then about the show I went to later that day. And I just decided to write a song about that, and that's where, for me, that's where it started about 2.5 years ago, was writing that first song. And it was hard to do, and it took me weeks to write that first song, and it was terrible, and it still is terrible, and that's okay.
Well, I think that's, everybody starts somewhere. And I think there's people probably watching that are, new to songwriting. And I think knowing that it's okay to not write a hit right out of the gate. And it's not even about writing hits. I mean, you and I have talked about this offline a ton, where it's about, you can write some really great songs that communicate emotion and that you like and that other people like, without kind of chasing that commercial thing too. Who would you say, I mean, you mentioned Jerry Lee Lewis. What are some other influences, as you think about songwriting, who are sort of the people you look up to?
Yeah, and Jerry Lee Lewis, I mean, great artist, but not somebody who I really model my songwriting after. But it was at that time when I moved. I grew up in Illinois, and I moved down to the middle of Texas, Central Texas, right out of college, and I went from listening to top 40 hits in Chicago to listening to Texas music, which is, the Texas music scene is so great and so phenomenal. And I knew nothing about that world. And I immersed myself in it, and it immediately changed me as a listener. It started shaping my songwriting that wouldn't take place for decades. It started shaping that. And it was, sitting on the banks of Auditorium Shores in Austin and listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan. I happened to move down there when the Texas Flood album came out, and which is a phenomenal and probably still my favorite album of all time. And and then I started going to clubs in Austin, and I started, hearing, some of the great blues people that played in, Luann Barton, Angela Straley, and some of these amazing blues singers that went through Austin. And then, of course, I was exposed to some of the great Texas songwriters like Guy Clark and Towns Van Zandt, Blaze Foley, people like that. So I was really fortunate to end up in Central Texas at a time when these people were really taken off. I mean, they were already established by the time I got down there in the 80s, but they were new to me, and their music helped my thinking of music really take off. And it just really turned me around and made me pay attention to lyrics, and pay attention to the subtleties of the melody changes that are in these songs, and understand what the truth of songwriting really is. And that's what I'm trying to kind of model myself out at these days, as I write.
So do you play an instrument, or do you just write lyrics, or what's your kind of mode of songwriting?
Yeah, I dabble with the guitar. I'm not going to say I'm a guitar player. Um, and I've got a brand new Gibson J45 sitting in the other room, and I've dabbled with that. But it's no, I was really writing lyrics 2.5 years ago, and I really still am just writing lyrics. Um, the difference would be, and I know a lot of people struggle with this right out of the gate, is I've figured out how to also come up with melodies to go with my lyrics without playing an instrument. And that's really crucial, I think. It's okay to start out. I mean, it's okay to start out just writing lyrics and, learning how to write your lyrics down so they're in a format that looks like lyrics, because you'll see a lot of new writers who've written poetry just write lines across the paper, and that looks like a poem because it's a poem, and we could sit here and talk about the difference between poetry and songwriting all day. But one of the things you have to learn, about songwriting is also how to write lyrics on a piece of paper. And you learn that by looking at other lyrics. Look at the lyrics of your favorite songs, and that's what I did. And I learned how to write lyrics, and then I morphed into, yeah, but I want to be able to at least sing this so people can hear how I hear the words.
How did you do that? Did you just start kind of singing what you wrote? Or, because I think that's a struggle that people who aren't, instrument players or musicians, that would be kind of an overwhelming, or maybe an intimidating is probably a better word, prospect. So how did you approach that?
Well, I kind of forced myself because, and other people will have had this happen to them. I started sharing my lyrics to have them critiqued. I wanted people to see, I wanted to share them so people could see what I was doing. And then I wanted to hear back from experienced songwriters what they thought. Well, I kept getting these comments back from some of the pro writers down in Nashville and from writers in my group. Well, these lyrics look really good, but I can't really hear. Do you know how do you hear this? How do you hear the what's the melody sound like? And I heard that again and again and again for probably the first year that I was writing, because I just kept submitting, words on paper. And I realized that, I'm going to have to think about that. And so what I did was just, stop thinking about words, all the time. Instead of just thinking about what you're putting down on the paper, sometimes start by thinking of melodies, and start by thinking of the melodies without the words, of songs that you really like, the artists you really like, and just strip away the words and just listen to what, well, here's the melody, the verse. Oh, and here's how, it's the melody takes a change the last two lines. And then, well, here's the melody, and, the tempo change that goes on in the chorus. And as you listen to those things without thinking about what you're writing on paper, you start to have a respect and an understanding of the melody. And then all of a sudden, you will start creating melodies in your head, not just lyrics, not just the words. You'll start creating melodies. And then you start applying the words to those melodies in your head. And then you pick up the paper and start writing. And then you start singing that verse, or you start singing that chorus. And now I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I've got a melody and a verse in my head. And I will sing it into my phone, or I'll write it down into my phone on a note. And that's how your mind works when you start putting it all together. Even though you don't play an instrument, you can still put it together.
Well, I think like, as you're talking, I think that's an aha moment for me, because I get asked a lot by other songwriters that say, I write lyrics, I'm not a singer, I don't play an instrument. And it's really not about being able to sing or play an instrument. It's more just knowing how the words kind of fit rhythmically. And like, you can figure out the pitch a little bit later, but is there a rhythm to it? I think there's a reason that songs, people say that songs are rhythm and rhyme. And I think I think there's something to that, listening to what you're saying as well. So I think that's great. And it's funny that you say that once you start doing things kind of on purpose, your subconscious mind will then start to operate, and all of a sudden you'll be doing it, like you'll get those ideas that seem to come out of nowhere, but it's actually your subconscious processing what you've been practicing. And I think that's really important as songwriters, is to really practice things that we want to get better at.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent thing, Chad. That's an excellent point, because so many people think that there's some kind of magic switch, that you're just going to flip this switch and all of a sudden you're going to write the number one song that's on country radio or on pop radio, and it's just not like that. And I'm not going to say that part of me didn't think, oh, this isn't that hard. I've written before. I can write what I'm hearing on the radio. I can do stuff better. Well, maybe I can, but probably not going to start out doing that. And yeah, you have to practice. I write every day. I know other people who do too. You have to write every day, and you have to, of course, and I'm sure you're going to want to touch on this, you have to educate yourself. I mean, songwriting is certainly a learned craft. Nobody is born to songwrite. You can say Bob Dylan's a great songwriter and all that, but somewhere along the way he figured out how to put it together, and he paid attention to what other people were doing, and that goes for any artist. And you can hear John Lennon and Paul McCartney. You'll hear these awesome songwriters from years ago talk about their influences, and those are the people they paid attention to, and then they practiced, and then they wrote crappy songs, and then they wrote good songs, and they wrote great songs, and it all came from doing it all the time.
Well, I think to the point of, you hear people say that all the time, like, I could write something better than what's on the radio. And the fact is, you can. I mean, it's possible, you probably can. But at the same time, could you do that right now? Sometimes something sounds simple, but in reality, there's a lot of thought and there's a lot of craft that goes into something that's simple. And I think what people are saying too is, I could come up with better ideas, but how is that idea executed? So you said something earlier about having your lyrics critiqued by pros and different things. How did you get access to those people, and sort of how did you do that?
Well, yeah, that started off. I'm a member of several songwriting organizations, and the first one that I ever joined, well, I'm a member of two, was NSAI, National Songwriter Association, down in Nashville, based in Nashville. And through membership with NSAI, you are able to submit, a certain amount of songs every year to pro writers, down in Nashville, and they will review your songs and then send the critiques, and that's how I started out. That, and of course getting critiqued within the songwriting groups themselves, because NSAI has chapters. I'm a member of the Chicago, Illinois chapter, but I'm also a member of, as you know, the Minnesota Association of Songwriters, and both groups have monthly meetings where they provide song feedback, and that's critical for new writers. It's critical. It was absolutely critical for me to hear from other songwriters, people that have been doing it, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, because these people have been writing songs for a long time, and most of them, not everybody, but most of them have, the basics down. They're beyond where I am, and they have something to teach me. So that's where I started with getting songs critiqued. Was the pros in Nashville, who I request the most tough review I can get every time since day one. And it's brutally honest. I mean, you have to be able to handle criticism if you really want to improve, because some of these critiques come back and they're basically like, well, you suck, but no, they're not that big. But
They feel that
they
feel that way though, don't they? They feel like that. Yes. Sometimes.
Yes. And of course, I'm the kind of person, I'm pretty thick skinned. I can handle criticism. So I don't mind. I ask for it. When it comes, I take it. What is nice about that, and with even the songwriting groups, the feedback you get from your songs in the groups, is that over time, hopefully you see that the criticism starts to be purely constructive and not like, have you ever thought about doing masonry work? Have you ever thought about being a waiter? It goes away
Yeah.
from, you should never write another song, to, oh, you know what? I think you're starting to put it all together. And it is so encouraging when that kind of feedback starts coming in. It's so encouraging to know that the work that you're putting in uh, is starting to pay off, and people are starting to understand what you're trying to say.
So back to what you had said earlier, as well, as you said you write every day. Does that mean that you're writing a full song every day? Like, what is your writing, I guess, like method or process?
Yeah, I do, and I'm a morning writer more than anything. I like to write in the morning. I'm sometimes that is at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Twice this week, I've written in the dark on my phone, and then when I go back to sleep and I get up in the morning, I start working on it again. But yeah, some days it's like anything. Uh, I don't feel like writing every day, but I will get up and, maybe I'll spend an hour just coming up with titles, or maybe I'll just look at my notes and go, you know what, I had 2 lines of a bridge for this song I've been working on for 2 weeks. Let's get the bridge done. And that's something I did this week. I wrote 3 bridges. I think they're pretty solid. And I'm happy if I can write a bridge and it's good and it's usable and it's ready to go, that's a successful day. I still might write other stuff, but I might not. But my process is, I don't have any strict process. So there are days, a couple days ago, I woke up and I was driving to the grocery store and I had this idea, and I'm like, and it was just a hook that popped into my head about a mile away from home. And by the time I'm probably 4 miles from the store, by the time I pulled in the parking lot, I had most of the chorus done. And while I was driving, so I wrote it down, but I will write anytime, anywhere, if hopefully my insurance agent isn't watching, but I've been driving 85 miles an hour on the interstate and writing songs. So,
Yeah.
it's just, wherever I come up with the ideas, I've got to get them down.
Well, I think for me, and as you're talking, my mind is sort of putting this into perspective too. I think if you're serious about songwriting, I think you immerse yourself in songwriting throughout your entire day. Like, I think you put on the songwriter hat and you start to look for things that you hear or you experience in life. I think sometimes people think about, you have life and then you have songwriting. And I think for me, songwriting sort of is in every aspect of my life. I mean, things I watch, things I listen to, things I think about. I have this YouTube channel. I lead online workshops. Like, songwriting, I'm like immersed in it. And I think if you love something, like if songwriting is your thing, it sounds like you're kind of this way too. It's like you're feeding your mind something all the time. So then your mind will give that back at some point, I think.
Yeah, I think you are always writing. I said that I'm most productive in the morning. That's true. That's when I specifically, and I think that's important when you're a beginner, to block time out. Your phone's off, the TV's off. You try to eliminate as many distractions as you can. When I really want to get in the groove and don't want to be interrupted, I go down to the Mississippi River. I live on the border of Illinois and Iowa, and I'll go down to the river. I've got a few spots down there that I will just sit and stare at the river, or I'll walk the shoreline, and that inspires me to write, and it gives me ideas. Just the sounds, the smells, the visuals, the changing leaves, whatever it might be. But I think it's important that, especially, well, I think even experienced songwriters, it's important, but especially when you're a beginner, block out some time, if you can, and just focus on songwriting. Then you have those moments the rest of the day. Maybe it's something you hear on TV at 8 o'clock at night that, oh, that's a good idea for a song, or it's something that somebody says, I got an idea for a song. I was listening to a radio interview one day, and just the way somebody turned a phrase I'd never heard before, I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. And but yeah, I think it's important to have some structure to the process where your mind knows it's there to create and take the ideas into that creative space. And then, of course, yes, leave yourself open to creativity at any time.
It's paying attention and things like that.
Absolutely. I mean, and when I get stuck, I'm lucky because you hear that a lot with beginners. Oh, I got writer's block. I never like even saying that term out loud. I'm happy to say I really don't get writer's block. What I will have is, pauses in creativity. That's the way I prefer to look at it. And it's not a block, but it's my mind needs a reset. It needs a creative reset. And one thing I found that really works well for me when my mind needs, and this isn't something that takes 2 weeks, it can take 5 minutes. I will object write. I think object writing, and I don't know if you've done a video on that yet, but I think object writing is a really important tool because, so the way I object write is I go down to the Mississippi River, I walk the banks, and I look for one thing. And it might not even be something physical. It might be a rock, it might be a broken clamshell, but it might be a sound from a barge. It might be something I see, an eagle in a tree. But I will go back to my car, pull out the tablet, and I will sit down and I will object write for 5 minutes just about that one thing, really focus in on that one thing. And I know you do something similar too. And you
Yeah.
might find lines for a song in that one page that you write in 5 minutes. You might find lines that work in a song. You might come up with a song. You may not. But it just frees your mind, and now you're ready to write. That's what works for me.
No, I completely agree. Object writing and free writing, just off the cuff about anything. For me, it's not even about getting material for songs. Like, I've written so much stuff that I just write it and it gets put away. I should probably go back and read it. But in my mind, I think I'm training my brain to be creative and know that it's not stuck if I feel stuck. And I'm like you, I don't feel like I have writer's block. There's times where I don't feel like doing it, or I feel like I don't know what to say, but I don't feel like I'm blocked, if that makes sense. It's just like, it's kind of like anything else you do in life. Like, if you do the same thing over and over again, some days you're like, I don't feel like doing it today. Or like, if you eat the same food, you'll just be like, it's fine, but I don't really want that. And I think that happens with me and songwriting. And I think it's okay to ride that cycle, because the pendulum swings. Because then there's other times where I can't, the ideas are just like coming like crazy, and I can't even keep up with everything that I want to say. And then it's like, then there's other times where it's like, now I have to object write to just have anything come out.
Right. And I think, and we haven't really addressed struggles, but I think what's in, and so let's, if we kind of morph over from writer's block to,
Yeah.
something that new writers, and I'm sure some experienced writers struggle with, and I know I struggle with, and that is completing songs, finishing songs. I mean, that is my Achilles heel. I have a million ideas. I have a million hooks. I've got pages of titles. Um, if I wrote a song for every title I have, I would have a giant catalog of songs. But what I have is probably 60, 70 songs that are partially written, which is way more than songs that I have completed. And that used to bother me. It used to bother me. And I realized that that's just part of the way I work. I have these ideas, and some days it does all. You're right. Some days it just clicks, and that was a couple days ago. The song that I heard, that hook on the way to the grocery store, I wrote that song in 2 hours when I got home, and I had the song done. from beginning to end, and I was sharing it with one of my songwriting groups that night. So it was hot off the press, and it needed work, but it was still okay. And I think, when you struggle, and you have to remember it's okay to even write a bad song. It's even okay to, even when you write, we're not all writing great verses and great choruses. Even the pro writers are not writing great songs every day.
No.
And that's 3 or 4 people, pros sitting in a room. If they write 5 songs a week, some of these people, and they only get, 10 cuts a year, and maybe one of them's a hit. I mean, and that's 3 pro writers sitting in a room. Those of us who are writing solo most of the time shouldn't be discouraged when we have a day where we write a song that we go, oh, nobody's going to want to hear it. Yeah, you're probably right. Nobody's going to want to hear it, because if you don't want to hear it, they probably don't want to hear it.
Right.
But those days when you're struggling like that, you just go ahead and you write what you need to, and you know what? There's tomorrow, and you'll maybe write something much better the next day.
Well, and I also think that to be a songwriter, you have to write songs, and you become a songwriter by doing the process, not by how many you're completing. So is it important to complete them? Yes, because eventually you want to have finished songs. But I think, like you said, it's part of the process. And, you and I were in a meeting recently with Aaron Esheis, who is a big time hit songwriter, worked with Ryan Hurd, Scotty McCreery. And he said he'll write 150 songs a year, and they might get 5 out of that are actually worth something. And he said there'll be 3 hit writers in a room, and they'll write all day, and they'll just get a verse and a chorus, and that's it. And then it's okay. Like there's always more to write. And I think the lesson there too is I've seen a lot of beginning songwriters write a song and it becomes their golden egg, right? Like they rework that song and they ask for advice on it, and they ask for critiques, and then they change it, and then they change it more, and then they keep changing it, and it's never done. And they just work it because they think that this is their song that's going to be something, right? And I see that cripple a lot of writers, where they put too much importance on a few songs, where, like you said, you hear if a hit songwriter is writing 5 songs a week, 5 times 52 is what, over 250 songs in a year.
Yeah.
They don't have time to sit and worry about that one song. They'll worry about the ones that are worthy of it. So I think as new people, it's like, focus on quantity over quality at first. You can always go back and edit.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I'm not against rewriting. I'm a big rewriter, and I'm currently rewriting the song that I wrote on Thursday. It needs work, and I got some good feedback from one of my groups. And by the way, when you're in these songwriting groups, I think it's important when several people in the group will agree on a point that needs to be changed. Be careful, because not every point that's made in these songwriting groups you might be a member of are valid. There's a lot of opinion. It's all opinion.
It's all opinion.
And I think when you're real new, you tend to take everything very literal, and you listen to these people that have been writing for 20 or 30 years. You're like, oh, well, if they said I got to do this, I got to. Not necessarily, and I will vet songs that I'm serious about. My better song, I will vet them to different groups, and then when I feel it's really good, then I might send it down to Nashville. But it's just you need to just keep in mind, what is your goal with your song. And I don't know if I've jumped to a different topic here, but if your goal is to write a good song that you can play to your family, your wife, your significant other, your friends, and you just want something that you can play and enjoy, and they'll enjoy, then that's your goal. If your goal is to write songs that you hope other people will sing, which is exactly what my goal is, then that's your goal. Then write it, make it the best you can, and see if you can get somebody to sing it. and then you have people who are performers, and I know a lot of those people, right? And that is, and I'm not talking about just people in Nashville, pros and artists. I'm talking about in Minnesota, in Chicago, in Milwaukee, in other parts of the country. They are writing songs for themselves or their bands to perform, around their area. And if that's your goal, I think it's great. Write it, and then when you're happy with it, play it.
Well, and I think so definitely knowing what your goal is important, because I think like you said, if you are the artist and you're performing your own songs, that's a different thing than if you want someone else to sing it, because you have to write in a way that that person is going to want to have their name on it or have their voice on it, right? So you have to write things in a way that someone else wants to say. So there is a different level of you know being picked apart, and does it fit, and if a singer says I wouldn't say that, then they're not cutting your song, right? Like that's just how it works. Even
Right.
low level artists, not even big artists, it's like you have to write to their genre, you have to write to their style, you have to write to their age, like I've seen older songwriters try to write for teenage artists, and older people don't talk like teenagers do. Like
Right.
I wish that wasn't true, but it's fact, right? Like there's different generations, there's different, like just everything changes, the culture is different. But what I think you said about getting critiques is you really do have to learn when you kind of are willing to stand up for your own work as well. If you really like something and you're like, no, that's what I like, then you have to be willing to sort of push that and see where it goes, because sometimes it's people may critique your song and they're like, oh, I would do this. And it's like, well, that's great, but that's not what I would do. And there's not a right or a wrong there. It's just those are two ways that it could be done. It's kind of like
Well,
9 or like 8 plus 1 equals 9, but so does 4 plus 5, right? You get to the same result.
yeah, I think the only exception to that is when you're writing for an artist, and when you're writing for something you want to pitch,
Yep.
because then there's less leeway. There's way less flexibility because, as you said, you have to write a song that has a message that artist agrees with, that they would want to sing. You're writing a song about divorce and all this, and this guy is newly married. You're writing for a male artist who's newly married, and his wife is pregnant, and they just bought a dog, and he's never going to sing about divorce, and you know,
Right.
and the same thing holds true. If you're going to write a drinking song and you're pitching it to an artist who maybe is a recovering alcoholic, the last thing you want to do is pitch a song like that. But when you're writing for Nashville, let's just use that because that's what I'm most familiar with. If you're writing for Nashville, there's or anything, even if it's pop, you want to be listening to what's current and what the trends are. And you can't be listening to music from the 90s. Well, I love 90s country, and then write something for 2021 country. It doesn't work like that. And
Yep.
and and I think, so when you write your songs and you're going to get critique, yes, if you're just doing this for fun and for your family, you know, that's one way, to accept it. But if you're really trying to do something that you want on the radio, whether you're playing it or whether, you're trying to sell it to an artist, then you better be paying attention to what's going on. You better educate yourself, and you better write what's currently going on in that genre that you're interested in.
Well, Chuck, it's been awesome having you on, at home songwriting. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again and maybe jump
Yeah.
into some more techniques. And for those of you who are with us today, Chuck's song, Don't Waste the Rain, that's what it's called, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is in the latest edition, the November, December 21 edition of American Songwriter. It's the one with Dave Grohl on the cover. I know they must not have liked your picture enough to put you on the cover, but that's how
You
it
know,
goes.
I have no idea. I was fully expecting to be the cover boy, but I wasn't. No.
But congratulations on that song, winning. And I think we talked about a lot of good things that are, helpful for people that are starting out. And just, I really appreciate you being on the channel.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun. And anytime, I'd be happy to come back. This is wonderful.
Thanks so much, Chuck. And if you thought this video was great, please hit subscribe so you can find out about future videos here at Home Songwriting. These videos are all about helping you to write better songs.